Sometimes I get an idea for these podcasts, and the idea is very easy to execute. I can sit down and record an episode fairly quickly. And sometimes it takes 2.5 weeks. Hello, my name is Brad McIntyre. You are listening to the Cultivated Playwright podcast, episode number 9. So here's the idea that I had for this particular podcast. About 3 weeks ago, I saw the movie Thor Ragnarok at the movie theater, and I loved it. I thought it was an awesome movie. And because several weeks ago I was also teaching about criticism in the theater, I thought, hey, you know what would be a really interesting idea? I'm going to apply the contemporary movie, Thor Ragnarok, and submit it to Johann Wolfgang Goethe's 3 Questions of Criticism. And that will be a fun little podcast episode. We'll take something very old and something very new, and we're going to smash them together, and it should be pretty simple. And I thought it would be pretty easy to do because I know a lot about Thor, and I know a fair amount about movies, and I'm fairly familiar with Goethe's work and his 3 Questions of Criticism. No problem. Oh, dear listener, famous last words. It has been quite a struggle to research this particular podcast episode, so here's what I'm bringing to you. Goethe, in the 1820s, between 1821 and 1824 at some point, he wrote an essay called On Criticism. I know this because I hunted down the actual essay, and that took me quite a while, actually. I couldn't easily find it online. I had heard that Goethe came up with 3 questions in which to judge any kind of art form. He was speaking originally about writers, but you can apply it to painters, dancers, architects, playwrights, motion picture makers, what have you. The 3 questions are relatively simple. What was the artist trying to do? What was the artist's intention? Number 2, did that artist succeed? Was the result an accomplishment of that intention? And number 3, and this is the most controversial of the 3 questions, was it worthwhile to begin with? These 3 questions, which I teach in my classes, I decided I would find the actual essay that Goethe had originally written these questions in. And oh my gosh, it was difficult. I have a collection of basically the collected works of Goethe in my own library, and I pored over every essay in that book. I went online, I went on Google and Yahoo, and I did searches trying to find the origin of Goethe's 3 questions. And finally, I resorted to asking a librarian who was very, very happy to actually have a research task in front of her. Her name was Judy, and I have much gratitude for Judy. Thanks, Judy, at the campus library where I work. And she was able to put to use her library sciences degree and not just help people print stuff out or point out where the restroom is. So she helped me find the actual essay. And in the essay, he lays out these 3 kind of criteria for judging art, because art is subjective. So these 3 kind of questions are helpful because you can approach an artwork on its own merits, like individually, and you link the artist with the artwork. So that's the background of On Criticism by Goethe and the 3 questions that we're going to be working with. Now, let's do a little bit of context on Thor Ragnarok. First of all, the character Thor is from Norse mythology. He is the god of thunder in Norse mythology. And as a kid, I should point out, I'm still a huge comic book fan, and I read comic books when I was younger, and I also was way into mythology. In particular, Greek mythology and Norse mythology. I had that book of, I think it was Bullfinch's collection of mythology when I was a kid, and I pored over that as a young adolescent. And I pored over many, many comic books, and I have a great love for Captain America and Spider-Man to some degree, and the Avengers, and I read a comic book called Marvel Spotlight. I loved Wolverine before a bunch of writers got a hold of him and filled in all of his background. Back when Wolverine was mysterious and cool, before he had the ridiculous name James Howitt, back when he was just Logan, I loved Wolverine. And I, in particular, loved Thor. Because of my love for mythology, I loved Thor comic books. And I've been following the Thor movies as they've come out. I really like the first one, directed by Kenneth Branagh. I think it is a very, very solidly written narrative. I think it is a well-directed and well-acted introduction to the character. I wasn't so much a fan of Thor: The Dark World, the sequel, but I really liked this latest addition to the Thor franchise, Thor Ragnarok. And it was directed by a director named Taika Waititi. Taika Waititi is mostly an indie director. This was his first really, really big budget blockbuster kind of extravaganza. And so I set out 2.5 weeks ago to figure out what the answer to the first question was. What was the artist trying to do? So for me, it is, what is Taika Waititi's intention? Or what was his intention in making the movie Thor Ragnarok? I don't know, dear listener, if you are familiar with Taika Waititi as a person, but he is hilarious. He is very improvisational. He's very flippant. He does not seem to take interviews seriously at all. He jokes around the entire time, and he very capably evades most questions. He does not give straight answers to questions. And it should also be pointed out, because I watched like all of the interviews on YouTube that the press did leading up to the movie's release with Taika Waititi. I watched so many interviews with this guy. Most of the interviewers are horrible. They just ask just questions that, just fluff questions. What's it like to work with Mark Ruffalo? Hey, I hear you guys improvised a lot of this movie. How much of it was improvised? Hey, what was it like working with Cate Blanchett? Hey, we like what you did with the Hulk. How'd that idea come around? Like, a lot of the questions the interviewers asked, admittedly, were just ridiculous, fluffy questions. Nobody really dug deep. And I realize a lot of times when these movies come out, a lot of the mainstream press and the YouTube press in particular, or videos that show up on YouTube, they really don't have good interviewers. Anyway, that's beside the point. I just want to say, I pored over so many freaking interviews with Taika Waititi, and I came up with a couple of tidbits, little bits of answers here and there, just little diamonds in the rough of answers that could be applied to this first question. First of all, he did say in one interview that he tonally wanted to make the movie fun. In fact, to get the job as the director of this movie, he sent in a sizzle reel. And to make the sizzle reel, he did it in kind of an unconventional way. He took clips of a bunch of other movies and he put them together, and then he put music over all of those images, which is the song, the immigrant song, that's actually used in the actual movie Thor Ragnarok. It made its way into the movie, but he used that on the sizzle reel. So he wanted to show that he had this kind of idea to make it kind of fun and poppy and buoyant. Also, as an artist, he pointed out in another interview that he wanted to do something unexpected, unpredictable for his own career. He wanted to take a risk. He had been making small, kind of personal indie films, and he wanted to stretch himself. So, if you're an indie filmmaker, of course, you would make a tentpole movie for a major franchise. And as an indie director, Search for the Wilder People, I think, is his last one. What We Do in the Shadows, kind of a comical look at vampires. He's got a string of movies kind of behind him. He approached this movie as if it were an indie film, a quirky little indie movie. He described his take on Thor Ragnarok, the story of it, as being sort of a superhero version of After Hours, the Martin Scorsese film from the 1980s about a man who's trying to get home, and it takes him all night long, and he keeps running across all these people and having encounters and setbacks, and hilarity ensues. And so with this, he said, oh, it's this guy Thor who is trying to get back home to Asgard because he has to deal with this major event that is happening. There's a TED Talk from Taika Waititi on YouTube as well, and he has one little moment where he actually states what he tries to do as an artist. And he says he is drawn to outsiders, to misfits, to people who don't belong. In fact, he himself sees himself as an outsider artist, as a fringe artist. So he tried to apply this to this movie, these different aspects. Tonally fun, something risky and unpredictable for him, but still a quirky kind of indie movie take on a superhero film that kind of featured misfits and kind of outsider fringe characters. Question number 2 from Goethe would be, did Taika Waititi succeed in what he was trying to do? Well, as of November 26th, Thor Ragnarok has raked in $277 million domestically and over $513 million in the foreign market. And that is against a budget of $180 million it took to make the movie. So, yeah, it's totally done successfully financially. Yeah, that's a hit movie. It also is an unexpected departure for the character of Thor in the movies. And I have to remember, I'm talking about the medium of the films. As a comic book reader, the colorful kind of palette that Taika Waititi used and the kind of fun hangdog attitude that Chris Hemsworth brought to the film, those are in the comic books. Thor comic books are all over the map. Depending on what artist was drawing and writing the Thor comic books at the time, Thor has all these cosmic adventures and deals with aliens and monsters and just is all over the place. It points in the comic books. He speaks in this faux Shakespearean kind of dialogue. He takes on impossible tasks. One of the things I'm drawn to about Thor is that the range of the adventures that the character goes through in the comics is huge. So it stands to reason that sooner or later somebody would pour some of this into one of the movies. But for the movie-going audience, it was definitely a departure from the first two Thor movies. And it kind of captured some of the ethos of like the Jack Kirby artwork or the Walt Simonson artwork from some of the Thor comics. So did he succeed? Yeah, he did make a tonally fun movie. It was unexpected and unpredictable for him, and it definitely was a risk for him. It did capture that quirky indie spirit. Yeah, he did improvise. The actors improvised a lot of the lines in the movie. And it is about, and here's the thing, I'm not doing any spoilers for this podcast. If you haven't seen Thor Ragnarok, I don't want to ruin it for you. So I'm not going to get any specifics about the plot and stuff. But the characters are basically misfits. They're kind of fringy outsiders. All of them are kind of a little bit lost. Thor is literally lost in the movie. And he's dealing with a bunch of things as well. His relationship with his brother Loki. It's not a spoiler because it's all over the trailers, but he loses his hammer. He also deals with the death of somebody close to him. He deals with a long-lost relative who shows up that he didn't know about, who proves to be quite the problem. He's also trying to prevent Ragnarok, which in Norse mythology is the end of times, the apocalypse. And he's trying to protect his people. And all the while, he's kind of outside the being able to do anything about it because he's lost. He's kind of fallen off his path and he's trying to get back home. And I should do a little hat tip here to Chris Hemsworth because he really did credit in the performance of Thor in this movie of playing the tonal shifts. So the whole movie is not the jokey and improvisational and colorful and lighthearted at all. There are some heavy moments and some serious moments, and to his credit, Taika Waititi actually plays the range. So there are parts in it that are serious and are treated as such, and there are parts that are devastating and that are treated as such. And then the funny parts are, of course, funny, and there's a lot of those. So number 3, was it worthwhile? Well, I do believe that Thor Ragnarok was a shot of adrenaline to superhero movies, in particular Marvel movies, which do get the criticism of being tired or kind of been there, done that for audiences. And I think this is a little bit of a nitpicky kind of criticism, because they are based on comic books, and comic books are, well, they're comic books. They're they're like serialized stories that are kind of, disposable. Like, they're comic books. So the movies are kind of formulaic because they're motion pictures, but they're also based on formulaic art forms. They're on comic books. So to say that the Marvel franchise is kind of tired and everybody's seen it and done it, and this is a super departure. It is a departure from the usual Marvel movies, but I don't think the Marvel movies, I think they're getting a bad rap. I think it's a genre. So they're one movie is going to be similar to another movie in at least some ways. But I do think this was kind of a boost to the superhero movies in general, especially after as I'm recording this, the Justice League has come out, and it is not doing great at all. So Thor Ragnarok was kind of a welcome boost in the genre. I do think it's going to influence other movies, because that's how Hollywood works. If something works, then keep doing that. So probably going to see some more lighthearted superhero movies that are kind of funny and poppy and colorful. Thor Ragnarok, it should be admitted, does take a page out of the book of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which was the first of the Marvel movies to kind of be lighthearted and sarcastic, and at the same time kind of snarky and heartwarming, with kind of lovable outcast characters. Is the movie timeless and going to be a classic of world cinema? I doubt that, seriously. But was it worthwhile? Yeah, I think it was worthwhile. So what was Taika Waititi setting out to do? To make a fun movie, unexpected movie, a quirky kind of indie movie, and about misfits and outsiders. Did he do it? Yeah, he did. It made a lot of money. It was very successful. It still continues to be successful. And was it worthwhile? Yes. Bottom line, I think it was. So, that is Thor Ragnarok applied to Goethe's 3 questions of criticism. And this podcast, my friend, is done. And I will move on to other things next time. I really appreciate you listening. Once again, my name is Brad McIntyre. You can find information about me at my website, bradmcintyre.com. There's links to all my social media stuff, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, in particular my YouTube account. You can check out what you want. I have some plays of my own on sale on Amazon, so Google my name there, or search my name on Amazon. And thanks. We'll get back to it now after this unexpectedly long gap of an episode that took me a little bit longer than expected to research and turn out. We'll return to our usually scheduled programs after this. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.